Mayra had always been used to quiet nights in her small, cozy apartment. She liked the solitude, the soft hum of the city outside her window, and the way her thoughts could wander without interruption. That evening, she was curled up on her sofa with a book when a sudden knock at the door broke her calm. It was not unusual to have occasional visitors, but something about the timing felt odd. The knock was hesitant, almost nervous, and it made her pause, heart quickening slightly. She wondered who it could be at this hour. She walked to the door and peeked through the peephole. Standing there, drenched from the drizzle that had begun outside, was Adrian, her childhood friend, the same boy who had once been her confidant, her partner in mischief, and the one she had secretly cared for far more than she had allowed herself to admit. But years had passed since they last met. Life had pulled them in different directions. She had thought she would never see him again. Not like this, not at her doorstep, looking vulnerable and unlike the confident man she remembered. Taking a deep breath, Mira opened the door. Adrian's eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. There was a mixture of exhaustion and desperation in his gaze that she had never seen before. His usual charm, which once made her heart flutter, was replaced by a raw, unguarded honesty. "Myra, I need your help," he said softly, almost like he was afraid of her answer. Those words struck her in a way she hadn't expected. It was not just a request. It was a plea, a silent admission that he had nowhere else to turn. Mira stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. She could feel a knot in her stomach, a combination of curiosity and unease. "Come in," she said, trying to sound casual, though her voice betrayed a hint of surprise. Adrian walked past her, dripping water onto her wooden floor. She grabbed a towel and handed it to him, noticing the tired slump in his shoulders. The way he avoided her gaze at first, not once seated on the edge of her sofa. Adrian ran a hand through his wet hair, leaving a trail of damp strands across his forehead. He took a moment before speaking, as if searching for the right words. "I messed up my life, Myra," he admitted. His voice was quiet, almost broken, yet there was a gravity that made her lean forward, her heart tightening. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel lost." Myra felt a pang of sympathy, but also an old, familiar ache. This was the same Adrian who had once been fearless, the one who encouraged her to chase her dreams and laugh in the face of fear. She remembered the nights they had spent talking about their futures, about love, about everything they hoped to become. She had admired his drive, his confidence, and his gentle care for her. And now, seeing him like this, stripped of all that certainty, it struck her deeply. "I'll help," she said softly, almost without thinking. There was no hesitation in her tone, only a quiet, instinctive compassion. But she also knew that helping Adrian now would not be simple. It would demand patience, understanding, and an openness she wasn't sure she was ready to give. And yet, something in his expression, the way his eyes seemed to plead for connection, made it impossible to refuse. Adrian exhaled, a shuddering breath that seemed to carry all the weight of his regrets. He looked around the apartment briefly, as if noticing her life in fragments. The books neatly stacked on the shelf, the soft glow of a lamp in the corner, the mug of tea she had forgotten on the table. It all seemed ordinary, mundane, yet comforting. He didn't speak for a while, and the silence between them was heavy, filled with memories and unspoken words. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I thought I could handle everything on my own," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I was wrong. I've been running in circles, making mistakes I can't undo. And now, I don't know where to start." Mira listened, absorbing every word. She could feel the old bond they shared tugging at her heart. The truth was, she had never stopped caring for him, despite the years and the distance. But she also remembered the heartbreak, the moments when she had felt abandoned by the very person she had trusted most. Helping him now felt like stepping back into that storm. But maybe this time, things could be different. "Start by telling me what's going on," she said. Her voice was gentle but firm, a reminder that while she wanted to help, she needed honesty. Adrian nodded, his eyes reflecting gratitude and vulnerability. He began to speak slowly, carefully choosing his words, revealing pieces of his struggles, career failures, lost opportunities, and personal mistakes that had piled up until he felt suffocated. Each word painted a picture of a life spiraling out of control. Yet there was also a quiet hope beneath it, a glimmer that perhaps things could be repaired. Mira found herself leaning closer, offering comfort without overstepping. She realized that she didn't just want to help him out of sympathy. She wanted to help because she still believed in the person he used to be, the person she had always cared for. She felt the old warmth returning, the flicker of connection that had never truly died. And she also felt the tension, the fragile line between past wounds and new beginnings, a line she wasn't sure she could navigate without risk. Hours passed as they talked. Mira listened, asked questions, and offered advice where she could. Adrian, in turn, revealed not just his mistakes, but also his regrets and his hopes, the kind of things people rarely shared. She noticed the subtle ways he changed as the conversation went on, the relaxation in his posture, the ease in his voice, the way his eyes occasionally softened when he looked at her. It was like watching someone rediscover themselves, slowly and painfully. With her as the witness. By the time the night had deepened, and the rain had settled into a steady drizzle, Myra realized that this encounter was far from ordinary. She hadn't just opened her door to a friend. She had opened her heart to someone who carried years of emotions and untold stories. And she knew, instinctively, that helping Adrian would not be a simple task. It would demand patience, understanding, and courage. But more than that, it might also lead to something unexpected, something neither of them could predict. When Adrian finally stood to leave, she felt a mixture of relief and longing. "Thank you," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers one last time before he stepped into the night. Myra closed the door slowly, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. She knew this was just the beginning. She didn't know how far this would go, or what challenges lay ahead. But she understood one thing clearly. Her life had shifted in a single knock at the door, and nothing would ever be the same again. That night, Myra sat by her window, staring out at the rain-soaked streets, thinking about the fragile line between past and present, between love and friendship. She thought about the trust she would need to give, and the hope she would have to hold on to. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a spark of excitement, a quiet thrill at the possibility of rediscovering not just Adrian, but herself in the process. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, both wild and unpredictable. And as Mira finally allowed herself to rest, she knew that helping Adrian was no longer just a favor. It was the start of a journey that could bring heartbreak, healing, and perhaps, in time, love. Days passed since Adrian's unexpected visit, and Myra found herself adjusting to his presence in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't as if he had moved in permanently, but he lingered longer than she expected. He helped around the apartment, fixing a broken shelf, rearranging a few things, even washing the dishes without being asked. At first, she was cautious, keeping her emotions guarded, reminding herself of the years they had been apart. Yet, every small gesture he made seemed to chip away at the wall she had built around her heart. Adrian was different now. He was quieter, more reflective, and carried a softness that Mira hadn't seen in him before. The playful, teasing boy she remembered had grown into a man shaped by struggle, and the vulnerability he now displayed made her heart ache with a mix of sympathy and longing. There were moments when he would glance at her, almost shyly, his eyes lingering just long enough to make her pulse quicken. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on helping him plan the next steps to regain stability in his life. But it was impossible to deny the subtle pull she felt every time he smiled at her or reached for something she had dropped. One evening, as the rain returned in a gentle drizzle, they sat together on the couch, sipping tea. The apartment was warm, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows on the walls. Myra had been reviewing some plans Adrian had shared, giving advice where she could. Yet, her mind kept drifting back to him, to the way his fingers brushed hers accidentally, to the faint tension in the air that neither of them acknowledged. It was the kind of quiet intimacy that grew from shared history, unspoken emotions, and a lingering connection too strong to ignore. "Do you ever regret leaving?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, fragile and loaded. Adrian froze for a moment, looking down at his tea, then slowly met her gaze. "Every day," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "I thought I needed space to figure things out, but all I did was create distance. Distance from you, from myself. I was wrong, Myra. I know that now." Her chest tightened at his words. It was one thing to hear him say he needed help, another entirely to hear him admit he regretted leaving her. She remembered the loneliness that followed his absence, the nights when she wondered if he even thought about her at all. And now, here he was, admitting his mistakes, and her heart refused to remain untouched. They spent the night talking, not just about his struggles, but about the years they had lost, about the dreams that had faded, and about the quiet moments that still lingered in their memories. Adrian shared stories of mistakes, bad choices, and heartbreak, but also of small victories and lessons learned. Mira listened, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just holding space for him to speak. Each revelation drew them closer, weaving an emotional intimacy that felt both dangerous and inevitable. One night, while she was making tea, Mira noticed Adrian watching her in a way that made her pause mid-step. His gaze wasn't just friendly or familiar. It held something deeper: longing, hesitation, and something she couldn't name. Her heart skipped a beat. "What?" she asked softly, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the tremor in her voice. Adrian looked down for a moment, then back at her, his eyes locking onto hers. "Do you know why I really came back?" he asked, his voice low, almost vulnerable. "You said you needed help," she replied, her curiosity piqued but cautious. "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "I came because I couldn't stop thinking about you. I came because every time my life fell apart, the only person I wanted to run to was you." Myra's breath caught. She had not expected this confession. The words carried a weight that left her momentarily speechless. Years of unspoken feelings and unresolved tensions suddenly resurfaced, threatening to overwhelm her. She wanted to be angry, to remind him of the past, but the sincerity in his eyes made it impossible. "You left without a word," she said quietly, the pain in her voice soft but unmistakable. "I waited. I wondered if you even cared." "I know," he admitted, his voice thick with regret. "And it was the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I was strong enough to handle everything alone, but I wasn't. I lost my way. And I lost you in the process." The room fell silent, the only sound the gentle tapping of rain against the window. Myra's mind raced, torn between past hurt and present longing. She could see the raw honesty in Adrian's face, the vulnerability he was exposing, and she knew this moment could change everything between them. She wanted to run, to protect herself from further pain. But she also wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that years of distance had created. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I realized I can't fix anything alone," he said. "And because you were always the one who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I came for help. Yes, but the truth is, I needed you more than anything else." Myra felt her heart tighten. She hadn't expected to feel this again. Not so soon, not so intensely. The way he looked at her, the honesty in his voice, and the raw emotion he carried, all of it stirred something she thought she had buried long ago. She realized that helping him wasn't just about guiding him through his struggles. It was about navigating their complicated, unresolved feelings that had never truly faded. Days turned into nights, and each conversation, each shared silence, drew them closer. There were fleeting touches, his hand brushing against hers, a shared laugh, a glance that lingered too long that made Myra's heart race. Yet neither spoke of the possibility of romance. It was an unspoken tension, a slow burn that grew with every moment they spent together. Adrian began to open up more about his life, his fears, his failures, and his dreams for the future. Myra offered guidance and support, helping him organize his thoughts and plan for what was ahead. But beneath the practical conversations lay something more profound, a reconnection of hearts that had once been intertwined. She could feel the shift in their dynamic, the subtle changes in the air around them. Every time he smiled at her, it was as if the years of distance dissolved, and she was reminded of the boy she had loved and the man he was becoming. One evening, as the rain poured outside, Adrian stood by the window, watching the water streak down the glass. Myra approached quietly, her steps careful, and placed a hand on his shoulder. He turned to her, and their eyes met. There was no need for words. Everything they had left unsaid was in that gaze. She felt the old connection, the magnetic pull that had drawn them together long ago, stronger than ever. "I don't know if I can trust myself again," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not after all this time." "Then let me prove it," he said softly. "Let me show you that I'm not the same person who walked away. I came back because I want to be better. Because I want us to have a chance." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, to reach out and close the distance between them. But fear lingered. She had been hurt before, and the memory of that pain made her cautious. Yet, beneath the fear, there was hope, a fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been lost. The rain continued to fall, drumming softly against the windows, creating a rhythm that matched the beat of their hearts. They stayed there, close but not touching, speaking in whispers, sharing memories, and slowly letting the walls around their hearts come down. It was a delicate dance, one that required trust, patience, and courage, but both of them felt the undeniable pull drawing them together. As the night grew darker, Myra realized that Adrian's visit, which had begun as a simple request for help, had transformed into something much deeper. It wasn't just about solving problems or planning the future. It was about reconnecting, rediscovering, and navigating the complex emotions that had lingered between them for years. She didn't know what the coming days would bring, but she felt certain of one thing: their story was far from over, and whatever was about to unfold would change them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. For the first time in a long while, Myra allowed herself to feel the possibility of love again. She understood that helping Adrian wasn't just about his struggles. It was about giving both of them a chance to heal, to reconnect, and perhaps to find something beautiful in the process. And as they sat together in the quiet warmth of her apartment, the storm outside mirrored the storm inside. a chaotic yet exhilarating reminder that some connections, once formed, never truly fade. The next morning, the apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional tap of rain against the window. Myra sat at the small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, her thoughts racing. Adrian had stayed longer than usual last night, and she couldn't stop replaying the way he had looked at her, the words he had whispered, and the vulnerability he had shown. She felt a mix of excitement, fear, and longing. The bond they were rebuilding was fragile, yet undeniable. It was a tension that kept her heart on edge, reminding her that life could change in a single moment. Adrian appeared in the doorway, holding his own cup of tea. He paused for a moment, looking at her, and she noticed the way the morning light caught in his eyes. There was a softness there, a quiet hopefulness that made her chest tighten. He walked over and sat across from her, and for a moment, they simply watched each other, neither speaking. Words were unnecessary. The history between them, the trust and heartbreak and unspoken affection, filled the silence. "I didn't just need help with my life," he said suddenly, breaking the quiet. His voice was low but steady, filled with honesty. Myra's heart skipped. She had expected him to talk about his struggles or ask advice, but this was something deeper, something personal. I need you," he continued, his eyes locking with hers. "Not just as a friend. I need you to be in my life in a way I didn't let you before." Myra felt a wave of emotion crash over her. She wanted to ask questions, to challenge him, to protect herself from potential pain, but the sincerity in his gaze made that impossible. The man before her wasn't the same Adrian who had walked away years ago. He had grown, struggled, and learned, and now he was standing vulnerable, exposing his heart in a way that demanded a response. "You have to understand," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I didn't come back just because I was lost. I came back because I realized the only thing that ever made me feel alive, the only thing I ever truly wanted, was you. And I can't ignore that anymore." Her breath caught. Myra felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This was not the playful boy she had known, but a man who had been shaped by life's hardships. A man who had loved her quietly, painfully, and without guarantees. She wanted to run her hands through his hair, to tell him it was going to be okay, but she hesitated. She had been hurt before, and though a part of her wanted to leap into his arms, another part urged caution. Adrian reached across the table, his hand hovering over hers. "I know I don't deserve your trust immediately," he said. "I know I have to prove myself, not with words, but with actions. I'm ready to do whatever it takes." Myra swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him, and the part of her that had never stopped caring for him wanted to take his hand and close the distance between them. Slowly, she reached out, letting their fingers brush, and a spark of electricity ran through her. It was subtle, but it was enough to remind her of the bond they had once shared. The room felt warmer, the rain outside quieter, and for a moment, everything else faded away. Over the next few days, their connection deepened. They worked together on Adrian's plans, organizing his life, setting goals, and taking small steps to rebuild his confidence. Yet, beneath the practical conversations was an undercurrent of emotion that neither could ignore. Every shared glance, every brush of fingers, every quiet smile added layers to the tension that was building between them. Myra realized that helping him was no longer just about guidance. It was about walking a delicate path of healing, trust, and rediscovered love. One evening, while they were reviewing a list of tasks Adrian had written down, Myra noticed the way he watched her when she laughed. It wasn't just admiration. It was longing, a vulnerability that made her heart ache. She set the papers aside and looked at him, Adrian, she said softly, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can open myself up again after all this time. He moved closer, resting his hand gently on hers. I don't expect you to open up all at once, he said. I just want the chance to show you that I'm here, fully, and that this time, I'm not going anywhere. The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her. She had imagined many scenarios over the years, but none had prepared her for this. The man she loved, standing before her, willing to fight for her heart again. She felt a mixture of fear and hope, of hesitation and desire. And yet, she knew that to deny him now would be to deny the possibility of happiness. She had secretly longed for Dot as the days turned into weeks. They grew closer, their connection evolving into something tender and romantic. They shared quiet moments watching the rain, cooking together, or simply sitting side by side in comfortable silence. Each interaction, though subtle, strengthened the bond between them. Myra found herself laughing more freely, feeling more alive, and realizing that the fear of heartbreak was being replaced with the cautious thrill of love renewed. One rainy night, Adrian stood by the window, watching the water streak down the glass. Myra joined him, leaning against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body. I never thought we'd get here, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. After everything, I wasn't sure love like this could come back. He wrapped an arm around her gently. Neither did I, he admitted. But here we are, and I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure we don't lose this again. She rested her head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and realized that the storm outside mirrored the storm they had weathered together. The struggles, the mistakes, and the heartbreak. But now, unlike before, they were facing it side by side. The past no longer controlled them. Instead, it had led them to this moment, to a second chance they had both desperately needed. Adrian pulled back slightly to look at her. Mira, he said, his voice soft but filled with determination. I know I can't change the past, and I know it may take time for us to fully trust again. But I want you to know something this time. I'm not leaving. I'm not running from us. Whatever comes, I'll face it with you. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness but from relief and joy. For years, she had wondered if he truly cared, if their bond could ever be repaired. Now, she had her answer, not just in words, but in his actions, in his presence, in the way he looked at her with complete honesty. She had waited a long time for this moment, and it was finally here. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, the apartment was warm and full of light. Mira and Adrian held hands, letting the silence speak for them. They didn't need promises or plans in that moment. The connection, the love, and the willingness to try again were enough. For the first time in years, they felt whole, as if the pieces of their hearts that had been missing had finally returned. Over the next few weeks, they slowly rebuilt their lives together. Adrian found his footing, taking steps to stabilize his career and personal life. Mira supported him, but they also focused on rediscovering each other, creating new memories while honoring the past. Their days were filled with laughter, gentle teasing, and quiet moments that deepened their bond. The romance that had been dormant was now alive, but it was mature, tender, and rooted in trust and understanding. One evening, as they watched the sunset from her balcony, Myra realized that Adrian's request for help had transformed into something she had never expected. It wasn't just about fixing problems or solving struggles. It was about love, forgiveness, and second chances. She looked at him, her heart full, and smiled. He smiled back, understanding without words the depth of their journey. I never thought we'd make it here, she said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. We did, he replied, his voice full of certainty. And we will keep making it, every day, together. The rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and glowing. Mira and Adrian sat in quiet contentment, holding hands, hearts aligned, and ready to face whatever came next. They had weathered the storm, faced the past,